into our final section, which is, I think, really important and great because you are all funders, but communicating with our funders, right? People give people money. And so it really comes down to forging, establishing, creating those relationships that are very personable and purposeful. Everybody take note here. Understand what your funding organizations do, what's important to them, and talk about how much passion you have behind the work that you do. This is going to be, I think, really helpful in not just applying for programs, but as funders develop the RFPs every year for the grants they're going to push out, it's the stories that they're hearing from you, your work, that is going to help shift and change the scope of the grant programs over time. So just some tips in staying in touch with your funder, making regular contact. So you've got your quarterly notes that you can do via email, phone call, an e-news mention, like I said earlier, even social media tags, but make it a practice if you can to reach out and see if you can set up an annual in-person meeting. But do this to strengthen the relationship. Things happen, life happens, being upfront about what challenges you and your team might be facing with your funder, and doing that early on, not waiting till the final report is due. That way you can talk about modifications to the grant, other types of grant extensions, maybe even modifying your scope. Again, it really depends on the funder and the funding type. Not all organizations are as flexible, especially not the federal government, but they might be if you ask. And so again, don't wait till the final report is due. Communicate those challenges early on. And if there is a conversation where there is an agreement around your grant being extended or modified, it shouldn't just be a handshake agreement. This really needs to be documented and filed, because there might be changes even within the funding organization. And you want to make sure that whatever arrangements were made were documented and you can refer to, because you don't want anything to jeopardize your chances of being able to secure funds from that organization. I'm going to pause there and open it up to some questions of the panelists. You kind of touched upon this earlier, but again, why is it important to communicate issues? When we talk about cultivating relationships, how do you like to be engaged and communicated with, and how often? And if you could talk about some examples you've encountered, issues within organizations, such as change of scope or change of leadership, significant delays in projects being delivered. Describe instances where the entity came to you and they were able to handle this with you really well. In situations that we want to avoid, examples of where it went really bad. And then finally, have there ever been instances where an awardee just disappears? You can't find them. You don't know what happened to your $50,000. What happens there? Is there an unofficial blacklist that you keep? Because people just kind of walk with the money. So I asked a lot of questions, but hopefully you folks can share a little bit of insight, because I'm sure you have seen it all and then some.
So I can be really clear that from a government funding perspective, there's no such thing as a blacklist. All of our funding processes are based on criteria, incredibly transparent. Even those of us in implementing departments, we partner with the finance department and the procurement officer to be really clear. Hey, there are ways that we can be adaptable to rise to meet the challenges of our communities, but there's always has to be structure, because it's good practice, but it's also in compliance with state law and county code, right? And so that transparency, that opportunity, it grounds everything we do, from the more adaptive partnership we develop with Hawaii Community Foundation 2.0 Strong, and all the way to the more standard grant making opportunities, from PONC stewardship to kind of CRF and innovation grants, right? So just be crystal clear on that. On the flip side, for my time working in community, philanthropy talks to one another. And it works all kinds of ways, right? Examples of, this organization has been highly effective and impactful their mission or their work is shifting, who are three folks that I know in this work who want to invest and want to support that type of shift? Maybe it's not me anymore, right? I'm a startup nonprofit kind of funder, right? They're shifting from services to organizing or vice versa. The downside, right? I think philanthropy often, and I'm not going to speak for Diane, she can speak for herself too, in her experience. I think they very rarely say, "Oh, that organization is not a good investment. It's not working out." But where that type of energy has worked through is around staff transitions, right? Or kind of within broader movements. Executive director transitioned, not clearly sure why, no communication from the organization. Doesn't mean the organization is no longer a worthwhile investment, but from philanthropy side, are they now a risky investment, right? In terms of this lack of communication more than anything else, but also the impacts of a transition of leadership. And so, I think that's one part of another reminder around really building those partnerships.
First of all, we're philanthropy. I think that Bob might have mentioned this. We need you all to do this work. We have this money that people want to invest in community, and we need you to do the work. And we're rooting for you. We support you. So if you're having challenges, it's really good for you to talk to us about it, and we can try to figure it out. We're not going to ding you because you're, learning things as you're going along, because everybody does. Almost every organization, they get into the project and they learn something. They find out they can do this or they can't do this, or maybe this is a better way to do it. And so that is all understandable and acceptable. And so changes of scope are frequent. The documentation is really helpful because, again, if I'm gone and somebody else reads the final report and they're like, oh, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. So it's really helpful to have it be documented. If we understand what's happening, that there's a change in leadership, and now the people who are in leadership and running the organization have changed. Maybe there was some problems with the former administration, and now the newer administration has resolved those problems. Those are the kinds of things that it's really helpful for the funder to understand what's happening. We even have the executive transition grant that helps to support that transition. So we understand that these things happen in community, and it's just really working together with funders. That's what's really important, is just trying to make what you're doing be successful for the community, because that helps us to be able to invest in the way that the donors who gave the money wanted to have accomplished.
Just a couple of comments on communication relative to Douglas's point about this is a partnership. The nuance to what Douglas said in regards to all the different grant-making programs within county government is that exactly true. There's these selection criteria, very clear and the like. Where this partnership comes into play, however, is the issue of capacity. So if we're not communicating, you're not showing us that you actually have the ability. If you lie to us, that's a capacity issue in order to actually deliver on what you're going to say and to do it well. So it actually does have implications in terms of your future prospects with any kind of funder, including county government. And what I do want to say is you all have a very, very difficult job as nonprofit community organizations, because in a business, there's a very clear transaction between the business and the consumer, and you're done. And if you're profitable, you continue. If you're not profitable, you close up. In your case, because of your missions, you accept the fact that there's a market defect, if you will, that you're not going to make money off of this thing. That's why you need partners to do this with and funding. And so your job is to relate to us funders that you actually understand what the kind of impact and change we're looking for. In the case of the county government, each grant program has a different kind of focus. Same as all the different pots that Diane has to work with. So you need to make sure you're clear about how your work actually impacts those things very specifically. And you have to be able to communicate that, not just in a proposal, but in an ongoing basis. The other part is you need to relay to us about the people that you're serving and what's happening there, because we are not in touch with the people you serve and who you choose to benefit. And then the last one, going back to the capacity issue, you have to instill confidence in us that it's not just you, that you have a bench, that you have a team, and especially that you have other partners in the community who are actually helping you do this. And in that way, when you communicate that on a regular basis with us, then we build confidence and trust in your work and our investment in you. So the communication piece is huge, and I know it's like a lot of effort that you're charged with to actually make that happen, but it's critical because this partnership is what actually affects systemic change, the kinds of changes we want to see in our communities.